American Airlines is the world's largest airline by fleet size. With over 950 aircrafts, many passengers in the US and around the world will be familiar with their aircrafts. However, with the recent traveling restrictions, all airlines are hurting, and without government intervention, they might go under and possibly start laying off thousands of workers in the process. In this video, we're going to look into the history of American Airlines and what the future of this iconic airline entails. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos. American Airlines can trace its roots back to the 1920s, where American Airways was simply a common name for a number of independent carriers. After consolidating into one company, the airline was founded as American Airways in 1930. The airline operated from Boston to New York and Chicago, to Dallas, and from Dallas to Los Angeles. In 1934, after being bought by E.L. Cord, American Airways was renamed as American Airlines. With Cyrus Rolette Smith as the president, Smith introduced the Douglas DC-3s into the fleet and collaborated with New York Mayor Valerio LaGuardia to build New York City's LaGuardia Airport. American Airlines was also the first airline in the world to be the owner of an airport lounge, an invite-only membership lounge, which became known as the Admirals Club. In 1937, American Airlines carried its 1 millionth passenger, and at the end of the decade, American Airlines was on top of all other domestic carriers in terms of revenue per passenger mile. On June 10, 1939, American Airlines stock began trading on the New York Stock Exchange. During World War II, American Airlines retrofitted many planes in their fleet into a military configuration to be operated by the Air Transport Command. In 1942, American pioneered the airline catering business with the introduction of Sky Chefs. After World War II, American launched several subsidiaries, including American Overseas Airlines. This was created to serve European destinations, and Linus Airlines Americanas de Mexico, created to serve Mexican destinations. American was then the largest airline in America and the second largest in the world. After Aeroflot Russian Airlines, AOA later merged with Pan Am World Airways. American Airlines was also introducing new tech to their planes. One of the biggest things was a system designed to keep track of available seats on flights. In 1958, American was the first U.S. airline to start transcontinental service in both directions with the Douglas DC-7 airplane. By then, they also introduced the coach cabin, which they billed as a comfortable, cost-effective alternative to first class. In 1959, American focused on transcontinental jet services with the new Boeing 707, but still maintained connection from feeder cities using smaller aircrafts. In the next 5 years, American led the industry in many aspects. They worked with IBM to create the Sabre data system, which grew to become the second largest data processing system, second only to the United States government's SAGE system. In 1967, after being introduced to the company by AA design consultant Henry Dreyfuss, Vigilante Associates designed the Eagle logo for American Airlines, which is still in use to this day. In 1966, American officially retired their last piston engine airplane and had introduced the Boeing 727 and the Boeing 747 into the fleet, complementing the existing 707 jet aircraft. By the 1970s, American was offering long-haul international services from Chicago and New York to Australia via Honolulu, Hawaii, and the American Samoa. In 1973, they became the first major airline to employ a female pilot. American Airlines grew rapidly in the 1980s and 1990s after moving its headquarters to Fort Worth, Texas, in 1979. In 1981, American Airlines became a hub-and-spoke airline, creating hubs at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport and Chicago Airport. Under the new leadership of CEO Bob Crandall, American Airlines started flights from Europe and Japan in the mid-1980s. American Airlines created the Raleigh-Durham Airport hub in order to compete with U.S. Airways operation at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. American bought the rights to TWA's London Heathrow operations in the 1990s, which meant that American and United were the only two airlines with service to London due to the Bermuda Treaty. The skies were subsequently opened in 2008 due to the US-UK Open Skies Agreement. In 1998, American started electronic ticketing, In 1999, American founded the One World Alliance, a global airline alliance that at the time consisted of British Airways, Cathay Pacific, Canada Airways, and Qantas Airways. In 2001, American Airlines bought Trans World Airways. However, American Airlines immediately began losing money after the TWA merger, and that was further accelerated by the September 11th attacks. As the decade progressed, American found themselves losing money like many airlines did after 9/11. American continued to suffer the effects of ongoing labor disputes with its pilots, as well as high fuel costs. In 2008, American announced that they would begin to retire their McDonnell Douglas MD-80 aircraft, replacing them with Boeing 737 aircrafts. The fleet currently comprises of Boeing 737s, 757s, 767s, and 777s, and MD-80s and 83 aircrafts. In July 2011, American made a massive aircraft order worth nearly $40 billion. They ordered 200 Boeing 737 aircrafts, as well as 260 Airbus A320s. The 737s are expected to continue to replace the MD-80s and 83 series aircrafts, and the A320 family aircrafts will likely begin to replace the Boeing 757 fleet, as well as allowing for new routes to be opened. The U.S. airline industry just closed the books on the worst year in history, losing a combined $32 billion excluding special items. The airlines have sold bonds, borrowed money, mortgaged their planes, frequent flyer programs, and other assets, and even sold additional shares of stock, a highly unusual move for an industry in this position to keep airlines afloat. They have also made deep cost cuts with the government help that prevented them from making permanent involuntary job cuts. The airline used buyouts and early retirements to cut costs around 16% of the staff they had at the start of 2021. In recent weeks, American Airlines and United sent out layoff notices to 27,000 employees between them, saying they could again be furloughed unless there is a third round of government assistance before April 1st. However, despite all the cost-cutting measures, American Airlines just added 10 new routes to its network for the spring and summer, including 8 new international routes, as the airlines try to ensure a strong travel season amid ever-changing demand. Miami is the focus of the expansion thanks to Florida's growing population, as a vacation destination with few COVID-related restrictions on business, specifically indoor dining. American Airlines is the largest carrier at Miami International Airport, one of the major gateways to South Florida, with the expansion bringing more travelers to the region, while also opening opportunities to continue further south. Popular Latin American cities will also see more daily flights, including on some of the American Airlines' largest aircraft, such as the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. And Israel is becoming an American stronghold, with the new route from Florida launching just 1 month after flights between New York and Tel Aviv. American Airlines was at the forefront of the American airline industry, and is still one of the biggest airlines in the world. During this difficult time for American Airlines and the travel industry, they are still expanding and looking towards the future. And with that being said, as always, thanks for watching, and like and subscribe to see more videos.